So, here we are again. I'm going through some reloading sequences. Oh, guess I better shut off the music. This is an interesting thing. I promise not to turn this into a political rant, but this is so funny. This guy playing is one of my favorites for years. His name is Tiny Tim. And the first time I saw a picture of Tiny Tim, I'm going to turn it up for a second.
The simple facts of life are such, they cannot be removed. You must.
Okay, so this is an interesting thing, because when I was younger, I don't know, I heard Tiny Tim on the radio doing Tiptoe Through the Tulips, and I thought, well, that's interesting. A guy doing this super high-pitched falsetto and what have you. But I got a little older and I saw a picture of Tiny Tim, and I went, wow, this guy's got to be the absolute darling of the liberal left. Doesn't have the classic Hollywood good looks. He got ratty hair, he walks funny, he talks funny, hook nose. Nice guy. But for years it bothered me. I'm like, why isn't this guy celebrated for diversity and all this? Then I bought, like a year and a half ago, I bought a collection of Tiny Tim's greatest hits that I hadn't had before. I had just had one of his albums and some of his songs. And it turns out he's a fundamentalist, conservative American, rah, go USA. So the poor guy's never had a place. He's never gone, even though he's got a gift. You know, he's like Aaron Neville or somebody with the Everly Brothers. But anyway, I didn't want to take it there. It was just funny he happened to be playing when I decided to do this rant about something that's been bugging me for a while. And I just learned from seeing him as a person versus, oh, his political beliefs are pro-American. He writes songs about the flag and about how great it was growing up, and he was in the 70s and the 80s when this cancel culture crap started. So, Tiny Tim, support him. American. I mean, I'm sure he's probably passed by now, but that's neither here nor there. He was a red-blooded American hero type guy. Oh, but I turned him off. I'm not supposed to have him playing on here. So, I promised you that I would just pass on stuff as I learned it, and that's all this is today. Although there is one rant I'm going to go on about straightness of sizing procedures. Since I've been kicked off of every forum on the internet now, I don't have to worry about repercussions, so I can go ahead and say things the way they really are. And when I use that term, say things the way they really are, I want you to understand, these are not opinions. Yeah, they're my opinions, but they're my opinions based on testing stuff. So I plead with you, I beg with you when you ask these questions. And especially after watching something like this, go out and try this stuff, people. Go see for yourself. Bet a lot of the retard, stupid, ignorant, brain dead, I could go on, arguments on the internet are based on unsupported opinion. I was out, well, here's where it started. This 50 BMG thing. I'm going to go down. My 50 BMG setup is there in the background. I've been shooting. This is my, I left off last time saying, hey, I'm going to go shoot. I'm not going to videotape anything. And that's kind of true, except that during the course of my shooting, I'm running into reasons to videotape stuff because constant learning, always, always, always it is about the learning. So here's the deal, I'm learning. And these big old cases allow me to do and test stuff. So cool. So I'm building a reloading setup. There is one place, I've told you before, how stupid I think it is when people get all excited about straightness of their reloading press. Straightness of your reloading press is ridiculous. You don't want your reloading press to be straight or tight. But I do have one place where I have to pay a little bit of attention to tightness, and that's when it comes to seating bullets on these big fat beastie brewsty cases. Let me explain what that means. I'm trying to bring this up so I can put some of this stuff into the camera. I'm getting better at this recording thing, but I'm still not good at it. And this, again, is very impromptu. But enough stuff happened, and I learned enough stuff that I thought, I'm going to share some of this with you. First, I had to show the efficacy of my homemade dies and my reloading. And so far at this point, I've been using, I got my two-piece billet back up and running. So I'm running it through the pace. I'm not going to tell you anything about it. But I've come to grips with the fact that I need to shoot these things free recoil, because I flat out cannot handle the initial recoil impulse of these guns loaded to size. Run them down to 2,000, 2,200 feet per second. I can handle them, but I can't get the ES cleared out. So, making vast strides here. This is not any kind of a negativity report. I'm just saying that shooting full house loads on these light guns is like to rip me in half. And I'm afraid one of these days I'm going to slip up and push my glasses right into my eyeball, because that first recoil impulse on what I keep calling a 12 to 14,000 pound load, which is a load that in a 30 plus inch barrel would produce, so between 30 and 36 inch barrels, which are common to these, they produce 12 to 14,000 pounds of energy. Well, that's translated both ways. So the initial recoil impulse is generated by making that 6 or 7 tons of energy out on the other end. So it's real, it's big. So handling the recoil is an issue with these. I'm working with it, but it's brought me to the point where I've decided I need to shoot free recoil, which means timing of the barrel is hyper important. Balance of the gun, all these things. The gun's got to shoot on its own. Basically, it's like hitting a jackrabbit in the back of the head with a big stick, and it's going to spit and hit the target every time. This thing bounces clear out of the bags. This thing. I'm seeing all of them. I'm talking right now about this two-piece billet, which is what I consider to be one of my best chances at a good, accurate, free recoiling setup. For a gun to shoot free recoil, understand that it has to be built so that it can shoot free recoil. It can't have any twists or turns or eccentricities. There was a gun years ago called Badly Bent because it had been bedded crooked and shot like crazy because the bedding, I had a gun biased one time, so the barrel pointed to the left when I was pointing down range. And I made the guy rebed it because it was built by somebody else and it never shot quite as good. I've since done that. I've played with it. Before I found out about barrel timing, I would play with bias. And I found ways to bias bedding. I could rebed a gun 3 or 4 times and all of a sudden it would come alive, start shooting free recoil. And that's what led me to believe that unless the gun recoils straight up its own center line, if it doesn't kick left or right, sometimes the bags kick left and right. If you're shooting off of a bipod, you'll find out the bipod always pops way to the left or pops way to the right. These are all indications that the gun is not recoiling up its own center line. These are opinions. These are examples of totally unprovable and relatively unfounded opinions by me. The things I'm going to show you today are not opinions. So, I'm going to start with a little bit of my sizing. Again, this is part of bringing you up to speed. I built some things. I took a piece of 3/4 inch aluminum and I turned it out inside and I reamed it with my chambering reamer and I made myself a gizzy so I can check solder setback. This group of cases has now been fire formed and then fired for effect. They're on their 9th firing. And I've been monitoring. This I just wanted to show you because I believe that measuring shoulder setback is a big deal. So I'll set this gizzy aside now. That's what we call it because somebody called it that 50 years ago and I thought that was a cool name, so I still call them gizzies. That's my shoulder setback measuring gizzy. So in setting up the dies for these huge cases, and the other thing is, remember I was just talking about recoil impulse. I'm going to talk about sizing impulse. I don't know if impulse is the right word here, but sizing effort. Sizing these big guys is really, I'm using a Big Max RCBS A4 Big Max press. I think it's called a Big Max or Black Max or something or another. It is right here. It's a big O-frame press. I just know that they call it the A4. I've heard it called a Big Max. This big old box frame press, this O frame press, goes from, right now it's set so that the handle doesn't completely drop. It's now touching my custom built sizing die. And if I push it, well, I gotta get this one out of the way first. It bottoms out and then it'll push. It's got that much, what people like to call cam over, right now with the die just screwed into it. That's one of the things I want to show you. And when I put a case in there and I size it, it flexes, it deflects this press enough that I can slip 14 thousandths of feeler gauges in between the die. Now that's been consistent. That is consistently sizing. But all these people that tell you stupid stuff like, you gotta make it touch and cam over a little bit, are generally completely full of crap. Because once you have achieved the sizing effect, what happened with this was I had a choice between turning the bottom off of the die and getting more clearance so I could set it with the feeler gauge, or I just found a setting where just as it touches down, then it deflects the die an additional 14 thousandths or 15 thousandths. So I can't preset it with a feeler gauge. I have to preset it with my own feel. But the way it sits right now, it's sizing decent. It has, as I said, these cases are on their 9th go around. And when I started, I built these cases, and the case length is 3.912 inches. That's where these started at, 3.912. Took me a while to get the dies set, but these cases are the ones that I set this number of 3.912 off of. I flip over today, I come down on my notes, because I'm just out here shooting, and I see that number 9, 237 grains with Lapua 800s, which are right here. Now the problem with these Lapua 800s is they only seat about this deep because of where I set the freebore, and the reason for that is because of the extremely long ogive. These bad boys right here, which are 750 grains, have an even shallower, it's probably a 15 or an 18 radius on the ogive, and it secants back into where it's, well, that's why I set the camera where it is. Hopefully you could see some of this stuff as I'm illustrating it. But anyway, these seat far out too, and what that allows for, this is one place where straightness is not important, but I do pay attention to it. I try to build a seating stem such that it kind of centers this up, because all of my dies are so tightly fitted, this big fat butt case will not fit into any standard seating die. It stops about right here. Whoop. So even my seating dies have been turned up, plus I have 4 different chambers, and this happens to be a tight one. This thing is 20 thousandths oversized. Big old bulgy monster here. This is one of the biggest chambers, and it is set parallel to the case walls. But these things all make sense to somebody who's interested in designing something. But here's the thing. 2 things I wanted to approach were that I want my seating stem, because the distance from here to here is so great from where it seats, that if this, I know that my die is concentric, but if my cedar stem is not concentric, it may push it in a little bit off on me, or it may bend it over a little and not spring back. So I am working on alignment up here, which brought me to something. These are what I'm using for, these are the cedar stems. Doesn't look like a cedar stem, but this is a cedar stem. All the work I've done in the past before I decided these are crap bullets, all of my illustrations have been done. I showed these cedar stems earlier, how I have that one. This one goes down about yay far, okay. Now I took another one, because I ended up with 2, and I bored this one out till it seats a lot deeper. See how that's a lot deeper? Like this is almost clear up to where the ogive becomes conjunct with the body here. So the cedar stem is bearing. I don't want to go into all that, but suffice it to say that you can really see the difference on one of these ones. One of them I've got blackened, and this is what I call my deep one, and this is my, it's still not factory, but it's quite a bit shallower. But you're going to notice something weird. This is a cedar stem and it's got a locking ring on it. And the reason is that the forces are so great on these when I'm sizing that I'm just kind of automatically beefing everything up. I've got different, well, I built these kind of lock rings for my change-out dies. And you'll notice that I split them. And this brings me to the next thing I wanted to touch on. I got so sick and tired of the internet rants, and I've never been able to say this before because I would make somebody mad. There's people all over the inner tube selling die rings, locking rings. The latest thing is some completely outlandish, but hey, you get a 3D printer, you got to do something with it. So somebody is 3D printing these out of who knows what kind of soft, sloppy crap. I've got Delrin ones, I've got aluminum ones, I've got steel ones, I've got round splits, I've got splits with a wrench on the side so that you can, you know, these are all just, I just decided after somebody posted a while back these new red Delrin rings, which I'm sure work just fine. And for holding dies, it doesn't matter at all. Dies go in, they're automatically crooked. Anybody with even a 10% functioning brain can figure out that a die goes in with necessary clearance. It cannot be straight. And I don't care how fancy your press is and how well machined your zero tolerances are. In fact, the best way to make a reloading press work is to loosen it up and let it slop. Because you've got 2 points. You've got the die itself, which goes in and has to cock over to lock up. And down below you've got a shell holder, which is just a ridiculous assembly of, it's just to drive and to get rid of. There's no alignment in a shell holder, for crying out loud. But I went out, this is kind of fun because one thing leads to another. I'm going to end up drawing pictures here. I had a Valkyrie chambered up in the lathe because I buy these 224 Valkyries because it's a cartridge that fell on its butt, and I can buy I bought like 5 sets of these dies for 20 bucks a pop, brand new, Reading or something. I don't know what they are, it doesn't matter to me. And I cut them off right here and I use them to make neck sizing bushings for my 2-piece die so that I can set the bodies at different tapers and sizes that I want, or I can buy a factory die if it's case hardened deep enough and I can open it up so that it fits one of my cases. Had this Valkyrie in there and I decided, you know what? I'm going to do something I've never had a reason to do, but I'm just going to do it because I'm sick and tired of people arguing about this kind of stupid crap. So I took this box of die rings. I had a die perfectly aligned in there so that I could bore it out, and I started spinning these on and tightening the various, and here again, you go on the inner tube right now and there's idiots talking about how this is the best way to do it, and then you put a piece of lead shot in under this little set screw, or you put a piece of copper wire, or you put a piece of Delrin, or, and in simple fact, they're all equally ludicrous. This die ring assembly with a lock screw in the side cannot help but be every single stinking time cocked between 5 and 10 thousandths. That's obvious from the simplest. I've known this for 25 years. Just look at it. When I built these die rings, these are for my 50s, and I wanted them to stay somewhat straight because I wanted to eliminate, so I made split rings, obviously, because that's going to be straighter. So what I finally decided to do, it goes again, but I had the thing in there. I could do it. I took a piece of paper and I graphed this out and I started putting these on, bringing them up, tightening them up, running a dial indicator against them. Number 1, 07 of rock. So I turned the lathe 90 degrees and I spun the die ring, same, and I marked some of these have got marks on them. I don't know, there's so many in here that I don't. Anyway, on some of them, maybe they're the ones that are still out there. I've got so many hundreds of these. These might be the ones because I was going through the lathe, I was probably setting them aside. I just grabbed this box, came in here and decided to rant. So, basically I would find the high side of the wobble, I put a mark on it with a silver Sharpie, then I'd spin it at 90 degrees, the marks followed themselves around. It was not that the die was crooked in there, it was not over and over and over. All of these black ones showed Number 1, 7th thou, turn, flip 90 degrees, 7th thou, same place, turn 45, 6th thou, same place, flip new thou, blah, 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 opposite. I started going 2, 3, 4, 5. This one here showed 7 thousandths to run out. It was sloppy like the first one. Duh, these ones were a little tighter. I come down, oh, I get to one down here. Number 7 had only 0.0055. Tight fit. And I just stopped. I'm not going to do all. They're all the same. They all have run out equal to, I mean, I don't know if I can draw this on this little piece of paper, but picture these threads. They run down at an angle to an opposing thread down here. The only way these threads can tighten up is to get bottomed out on one side and on the other side, which cocks them by the amount of it. Either you get this kind of stuff or you don't, but please, my people, think about this kind of stuff and understand that every locking die ring with a hole in the side is going to be cocked. Now, I ran a bunch of these, and they had from 0 to 1 thou, obviously, because they tightened down. Think! I finally decided to test this. And I decided, you know, I'm going to go in and document the fact that I actually put these in the lathe and I freaking tested them, and these run out by the amount of play that's in the threads. They have to. The reason it's important is because my bullet cedar stems are so far removed that I thought maybe it would behoove us to get rid of that 7th thou up here. So I decided, I'm going to put split and make these go in fairly straight, because I had locking rings on them, because oddly enough, serendipitously, these cedar stems for the big 50 have the same thread as the outside of the die. 7/8, 14 thread, something like that. So I'm going through all this and I thought, I'm going to pass this on. I'm going to pass on the fact that I tested this, people. Only a split die ring, only a split die ring can go on at 90 degrees to its threaded surface. It's obvious upon examination, but now it's been tested. No matter where you use them, if you want it square, for whatever reason, make sure you use a split die ring.